After the balcony doors open, a surprising choice steps forward. Catholic cardinals pick an American pope. Robert Prevost picks a famous name. Meet Leo XIV. Tonight, global reaction after the white smoke clears from St. Peter's Square here in Rome to South America, from the White House to the streets of Canada.
I have no words to translate this moment.
A cardinal for less than 2 years, Leo's links to Francis are everywhere. A life rooted in missionary work, most of it in Latin America.
He is very calm, but extremely intelligent and extremely compassionate.
Looking for clues about his papacy, his first public words spoke of peace and justice for all people.
La pace, la giustizia.
An American pope alongside a President Trump. There is already history there.
It was a coming together of the world. And boy, if we ever needed that, now seems to be the time.
The role is immense, the pressure's intense. The world, Catholic and not, will feel his impact.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault in Rome.
Thank you for joining us tonight. The Roman Catholic Church is celebrating a new pope, the first ever born in the United States, chosen here at the Vatican just hours ago and welcomed by ecstatic followers. He has taken the name Leo XIV, and he now leads a global faith that counts 1.4 billion members. Until today, Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost was known for his missionary work in Peru and various leadership roles.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
Tonight, we will examine what his impact might be in the wake of Pope Francis, who handpicked him just 2 years ago to lead an influential body in the church. His choice of the name Leo suggests a commitment to social teaching and the dignity of workers. Juanita Taylor was in St. Peter's Square when Pope Leo revealed himself to the world. She begins with that dramatic moment and brings us some of the jubilant reaction.
In St. Peter's Square, people from all over the world stood united, their joyful cheers welcoming Leo XIV, the first American ever elected as Pope.
Huge! Huge! I was already thinking of my family.
Many weren't expecting an American Pope.
You know, it was kind of like, the Kentucky Derby horse race, how they kept talking about who's in the lead. And he was always one that was potential. So never really expected a United States Pope, but happy to have him.
This priest didn't mind his long wait in the hot sun.
We're standing here for almost 2 hours. We never felt tired of standing because it's a beautiful moment. And this makes me love the church the more. These moments make me love my church.
The white smoke that signaled a new pope wafted from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel at 6:08 p.m. local time.
I'm speechless.
Flavia Correia is from Brazil, living in Rome. She has taken every chance she could in the past day to try and be here to witness the historic moment.
I have no words to translate this moment. I'm just feeling.
It took just 4 rounds of voting by the College of Cardinals to elect Chicago-born Robert Francis Prevost. The previous Pope, Francis, made him a cardinal in 2023.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
His first words to the crowd and to the world were, "Peace be with you." Leo emphasized the importance of dialogue and spreading the Catholic faith through missionary work, and he wore the traditional red cape of the papacy, which Francis chose not to wear.
He really is.
This Vatican watcher says Prevost named himself after Pope Leo XIII, one of the longest papacies in history.
He didn't choose Francis II. He didn't choose Benedict XVII or John Paul III. That would have been, I think, a more immediately politicized decision. He went back more than 100 years, and in that way makes the church new again.
Adrian, the professor we spoke to specializes in papal succession, and he said that it was significant that it only took the cardinals 24 hours to reach a decision.
So it was absolutely quick. I think that surprised a lot of people. I am curious, though, why the word significant?
Yeah, well, remember, with 133 cardinals, this was the largest conclave in modern times, and it was also the most diverse, with more coming from the continents of Asia and Africa. And the professor said that quick decision that was made can be seen as a strong show of unity.
Well, they will certainly hope so. Juanita Taylor, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
As we've said, the election of Pope Leo XIV surprised many. He's American, and he's significantly younger than his two immediate predecessors. Nisha Patel takes a closer look at where he started and his rise to this moment.
Che ha dato la vita per il gregge di Dio.
Cardinal Robert Prevost will now be known as Pope Leo XIV. Coming from humble beginnings in Chicago, the 69-year-old is the new leader of the Roman Catholic Church. He's the first American to fill the role.
He's not a showboat. He is very calm, but extremely intelligent and extremely compassionate.
Father Mark Francis, a former seminary classmate, says Prevost has always been committed to outreach.
He's a person who's very sensitive and is concerned to allow everyone to have a voice.
His papal name may signal his priorities. The last pope to take that name, Leo XIII, was known for focusing on Catholic social teachings, especially having to do with workers' rights. Prevost spent much of his life outside of the United States, serving for about 2 decades in Peru, including as a missionary and bishop.
Part of it was a very poor part of Trujillo. He always made conscious decision to make sure that the poor were attended to.
His record is not without controversy. Accountability groups have accused him of mishandling clergy sexual abuse claims in both Peru and Chicago. From Peru, Prevost was called to Rome, appointed by Pope Francis to hold one of the most influential Vatican posts, overseeing the selection of new bishops. He was made a cardinal in 2023. Prevost is believed to have shared many of Pope Francis's views on the environment and on the need to embrace migrants and the poor. Though he will have to clarify his views on the role of women within the church.
And one of the most important issues was the experience of women who don't feel valued and who want to contribute more to the life and to the ministries of the church.
As Pope Leo addressed the crowd, he spoke of the need to build bridges.
I saw him as someone who would build consensus, someone who was able to see that the via media, the middle, is where dialogue really is fruitful and takes place.
Tonight, many will be hoping the new pope can be a force of stability in a world growing increasingly turbulent. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
As you heard, the new pope has lived and worked in Peru, and many on the streets of Lima celebrated his ties to their country. The showings of national pride, coupled with celebrations inside many churches, in addition to living in Peru for more than 20 years, Pope Leo XIV is also a dual citizen, leaving many to consider him the second leader of the Catholic Church to hail from Latin America. Now, back in Canada, Catholicism remains the most represented religion, making this a meaningful day for millions. Lindsay Duncombe now with reaction from the church and people of faith right across the country.
Sisters at this Quebec City religious home waited to hear the name, then joy. On the steps of Vancouver's cathedral.
So we're talking about the new pope.
Nikki Fabella FaceTimed friends in Bethlehem and Jordan.
I feel like he is our hope to bring peace to all the world, to end the war, especially in Ukraine and the Middle East, especially in the Holy Land.
David Bach wants the new pope to bring the church together.
I don't want to see the changes that Francis made gotten rid of. On the other hand, when you have change that is too extreme, too quick, then you alienate conservatives, and we have had conservatives leave the church.
But at this anti-abortion protest in Ottawa, desire for a church that supports movements like this.
A church that doesn't reside in their congregations on Sunday and then become secular when they leave.
In a statement, Prime Minister Mark Carney, himself a Catholic, said at a time of profound global challenges, may his pontificate be marked by wisdom, discernment, a deep commitment to common good, and dignity of all. The president of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops knows the new pope. He says he's quiet and listens well.
So he appreciates the nature of Canada and wouldn't be someone who wouldn't know, the history and somewhat the culture and the diversity of Canada.
Pope Leo will inherit a fragile relationship with Indigenous Catholics, given the Church's role in residential schools.
How do we go forward in the future and be able to trust again? How do we break that negativity that now lingers in the cloud?
A high bar to meet, then, for the new pope. Canadian Catholics pray he is the man for a complicated and troubled time. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now let's get the view from the U.S. Chris Reyes is at Chicago's Holy Name Cathedral, the heart of the Catholic community where Pope Leo was born and raised.
Imagine there was Mass at this cathedral at noon local time, and by that time the Mass was over, they would find out that the new Pope is one of their own. I mean, all eyes were on Rome, but I wish there was a camera to capture what would likely have been shock and surprise inside that church. Because again, not only was then Cardinal Prevost not considered one of the front runners, any American was considered a long shot. And that's because of this idea that the superpower of the secular world and a superpower of the religious world should not be of the same nationality. Now, still, when the news hit, it traveled very quickly here to Chicago, especially to those who spent time with the boy who would become Pope. Have a listen to this one woman's account of what it was like to grow up with Pope Leo in a suburb just south of Chicago.
Wouldn't it be against the odds to grow up in the same neighborhood as the Pope? And look at this place. I mean, look at it. I mean, who would think the Pope would come from here, And I said, oh, a fat chance, And then I just got a text saying that he was the Pope. I thought, you gotta be kidding.
In many ways, Pope Leo is no all-American Pope. It's been more than a decade since he was last here in Chicago, spending most of his career abroad as a missionary, as a bishop of Peru, and then that very powerful post in the Vatican. But this city does play a very important role in his origin story, in that he considers himself an Augustinian, a Catholic order that has very deep roots here in Chicago. He also finished his Master's of Divinity in this city. Have a listen to the reflections of the rector of Holy Name.
You can never deny your roots. So if I were not serving in Chicago right now and serving somewhere else, I'd always remember my upbringing in Chicago and Park Ridge, because that's part of who he was. So I think you can't deny where you're from, or is part of who you are from the neighborhood, and that's just part of who he is.
Well, it's very obvious that Pope Leo has an international background. One all-American detail that was confirmed by his brother is that the new Pope is a Chicago White Sox fan. Don't know how the Cubs would feel about that, but I think they might give him a pass.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Reyes in Chicago. Now, any high-profile job these days comes with social media scrutiny. So take people's natural curiosity with how the new pope thinks and add in the current U.S. political context. It turns out Leo has left some clues. Paul Hunter shows us some comments drawing attention.
At the National Basilica in Washington, D.C., out came the Stars and Stripes almost immediately. With yellow and white papal bunting down below, it was a celebration of Catholic and U.S. history. A new American pope. So too at the White House.
I'm watching and they said he's from America. I said, that's great. We're a little bit surprised, very happy. But just a
absolutely great honor.
But as it turns out, the U.S. president and the American Pope have a history. Just last month, as Robert Prevost, Leo reposted comments slamming Trump for his treatment of an undocumented migrant. In February, he reposted an article slamming Vice President J.D. Vance. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others, it said, after Vance had implied Americans should care less about foreigners. And back in 2017, Prevost reposted this on word Trump in his first term was banning Syrian refugees from America. The original post calling Trump's U.S. an immoral nation, adding, Jesus weeps.
USA! USA!
So as those at St. Peter's Square cheered for Leo, it sets up potential tensions between two very different, very powerful Americans. A new pope and a president under fire for divisive policies. Just ask Americans at St. Peter's Square.
It's a message to the world that we have an American Pope to contrast what is going on in the United States right now.
The joyousness there, with Leo emphasizing already unity and love itself, a message to all.
It was a coming together of the world, and boy, if we ever needed that, now seems to be the time. And I think that says something about an American Pope. America right now has just kind of been a divisive force in a way, and this may be a counterbalance to that.
Donald Trump was also quick to say there are already plans for him to meet with Leo. The Vatican, he said, has already called. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Now I want to bring in our reporter here in Rome, Megan Williams. Extraordinarily, you have witnessed 3 conclaves now from right here, and I'm so curious what you thought when you saw Pope Leo and when you heard him.
Well, what really struck me from the beginning was how he was signaling continuity with the papacy of Pope Francis. There were a few key words. Of course, he thanked Pope Francis several times, which was gracious of him, but it also sort of signaled a continuity. He used the word bridge, which was a word that Francis used, particularly with regards to the United States and Donald Trump building walls. He said we need bridges. He talked about an open church, which was very much in line with Pope Francis. And he also talked about synodality, which is church speak for a less hierarchical, more inclusive decision-making part of the church. So involving lay people, including women, not just the priests and cardinals. And of course, his choice of name, Leo the 14th. Leo the 13th was an activist pope during the Industrial Revolution. He championed workers' rights. He was on the picket line. He developed sort of a social justice theology. So all of those things were a clear indication of where this pope's priorities lie.
And you know, we're talking about American Pope, but he also has very deep roots in Peru.
He does. He's a Peruvian citizen, and the fact that he was elected so quickly, just over 24 hours, to me, is a clear indication that he had the solid backing of a group of cardinals. I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect it was the Latin American cardinals. He's been in Peru for more than 2 decades. He's very well respected there. He knows all the cardinals there. He's, of course, American, but the American cardinals it's a much more conservative group, and Prevost really politically doesn't align with a lot of those cardinals. He's much more aligned with the social activism of the cardinals in South America. So I suspect that's where he had his push towards papacy.
All right, that's good intel. Megan Williams, thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
So the new Pope's predecessor, Leo XIII, is known for something else. He was the first Pope ever captured on film. This footage was taken around 130 years ago, a true film relic showing the 86-year-old pontiff. At least some of it was taken on the Vatican grounds, filmed by a British-born American who worked with the inventor Thomas Edison. So who is Leo XIV? And really, what kind of leader will he be?
He's a humble man. He's a modest person.
Coming up, insights into the new Pope from a man who calls him his friend. Plus, it's At Issue Night. Rosie and the crew will be here with a look at that pivotal meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and Donald Trump. Our special coverage on the election of the new Pope continues. Stay with us. The jubilation in the square below as Pope Leo XIV emerged onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. His first appearance as Pope came approximately 70 minutes after white smoke billowed from the Sistine Chapel, confirming the College of Cardinals had come to a consensus and their choice had agreed. Leo is now the Catholic Church's 267th Pope, but the very first born in the United States. And that is where we've reached a friend of Pope Leo, Father Rob Hagan. Thank you for making time for us tonight, Father. Can you walk us through the moment when you realized the new Pope was a friend of yours?
We're absolutely flabbergasted that it was as if a family member had stepped right to the balcony. Our brother Bob, an Augustinian, who we've just been friends with and has served us as a leader in our order, and certainly in the missions in Peru and around the world, and to see what Pope Francis saw in him, and to now see what the world will come to know, what we already know, is that Leo XIV is an exceptionally faith-filled, bright, gifted man.
So Father Hagan, you talked about how people are just getting to know him. It's kind of unfair, right? You've had this decades-long head start with him. What is something you know that will surprise people?
Sense of humor. He's a very relatable person. He likes a good laugh. He's not at all full of himself for as bright and as gifted as he is. He's a humble man. He's a modest person. He would come across as very unassuming. He didn't need to pontificate, if you will. But you could tell by his, he has a certain authenticity about him.
Just briefly, how did you meet him? Like, what was that first encounter? How did you become friends?
He was about a decade ahead of me in terms of time in the order. And so when you enter the order, you go through a period of what they call formation, where you study and you learn about Augustine and you read and you pray. And so when I entered, he was already well ahead of me and was holding some offices of leadership in the order. And he didn't big time me. He introduced me to, I was from the East Coast. He introduced me to the Augustinian brothers in Chicago and in the Midwest. He was the kind of person you could sit and just talk freely with at dinner. And so I found out very early on that this was someone that I considered a friend. And then watching him throughout his time in the order, just with great respect for the way he could build coalition.
Excellent. Have you texted him congratulations yet?
I have. I did.
Did you hear back?
We were corresponding last month because our province had bestowed on him really the highest honor in our order, and that is the St. Augustine Medal. And so long before this decision today, we had already recognized the gift that he is to our world and our church. And we had invited him to a dinner in celebration of that on the Feast of St. Augustine at our St. Augustine Church in Philadelphia this August 28th, which he had accepted. So I don't know. I think he might have a lot more on his calendar right now, but we'll see. I'll see if I hear if he's still planning on attending.
Excellent. Father Rob Hagan, thank you.
Thank you.
Good either.
Well, tonight, it's not just Pope Leo who is suddenly world famous. 3 seagulls had been hanging around the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, and they were there right at the moment the white smoke began to waft out. You can see one of them is just a baby chick. People on social media had fun with this, and in some cases, so did their cats. We have more Head from Rome coming up after the break. As head of the Catholic Church, there are big challenges ahead for the new Pope, both spiritual and financial.
If the Vatican carries on its current trajectory, it will eventually go bust.
And later, Rosie will be here with that issue.
Hey, Adrian, tonight we are, of course, going to talk about that meeting between the Prime Minister and the President.
I've been careful always to distinguish between wish and reality. I was clear there in the Oval Office, as I've been clear throughout on behalf of Canadians, that this is never going to happen.
So what does it mean for relations between the two countries? Is a deal near? Chantal, Althea, and Aaron Wary join me to talk about that and more.
The roar of the crowd at the Vatican tells a story. Emotion and anticipation sky high as the newly elected Pope emerged.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
Peace be with you, he said, echoing the hopes of those who gathered to watch.
I pray that he can bring everyone together and bring peace.
The conclave is over. The work for Pope Leo XIV now begins. After he's elected, but before he emerges on that balcony, a new pope enters what is known as the Room of Tears to get ready. Its name is a reference to the emotions that can come with taking on so much responsibility. Jonathan Monpetit walks us through some of the challenges that lie ahead.
Pope Leo XIV appears in public for the first time and is met with the joy of thousands packed into St. Peter's Square. But as the faithful linger to celebrate, inside the Vatican, the new Pope is now facing a unique set of challenges, which come from being both the spiritual leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics and the head of a city-state with around 3,000 employees and an annual budget of over $1 billion.
Among Leo's priorities will be choosing the people to lead the various Vatican departments, a process not unlike a prime minister choosing a cabinet. But the tougher item on Leo's agenda will be dealing with the Vatican finances.
Cardinal Angelo Becciu has been sentenced to more than 5 years in prison on several counts of embezzlement.
It's been plagued for years by several scandals that include charges of corruption, money laundering, and mismanagement.
The fall in visitor numbers is compounded by a decrease in donations by the faithful to Peter's pence, an important source of income for the Catholic Church.
The Vatican now has a large annual deficit, mounting debt, and its pension fund is on the verge of insolvency.
So how important is it for the new Pope to get the finances in better shape?
Miles Patinen is a historian of the Catholic Church who teaches at Oxford University.
Clearly, it is important because the finances are in bad shape and deteriorating. And if the Vatican carries on its current trajectory, it will eventually go bust. It needs fixing. Nobody's quite sure how to fix it. But the start of a new Pope's pontificate is surely the moment to do so if it's ever going to happen.
Before he died, Pope Francis tried cutting expenses.
Pope Francis has cut housing perks for Vatican managers and cardinals in order to save the church money.
But those efforts didn't go far enough, and he's left his successor with a problem that demands immediate attention.
And in a sense, he can't start thinking about kind of bigger questions of teaching and policy and the face that he presents to the world until he starts to get a grip on what's going on within his own house.
When it comes to more spiritual matters, Pope Leo is facing a divided church. In the days leading up to the conclave, cardinals were openly feuding about whether to continue with the liberal reforms of Pope Francis.
We want to change the constitution of the church. This is the destruction of the church.
Canadian Cardinal Michael Cherney told the New York Times that the conservative beliefs of some African bishops make him, quote, shudder. Much of the controversy is about synods, a series of discussions launched by Pope Francis on hot-button topics like the role of women in the church. And unlike in the past, Francis included ordinary Catholics, not just bishops, in the process.
Synodality is based on the principle that everyone in the church is equal, that the cardinal and the patriarch and the archbishop and me, a simple layperson, can sit at the same table because we share a common dignity.
It is a major innovation in church practice that upset conservatives who saw it as an assault on ancient hierarchies.
I think it's normal that there's always some hesitancy and fear of change. And this challenges a kind of very clerical, hierarchical culture that's been deeply ingrained in the Western Church since the Middle Ages. We've got a lot of baggage to get over here.
Canadian Catholics have their own set of expectations from the new Pope. Many, for instance, believe that if the Church wants to grow in Canada, it still needs to do more to address the legacy of sexual abuse.
I mean, the hordes of people have left.
Gary Warner is chair of Concerned Lay Catholics, a group that provides support to victims of sex abuse in the Church.
So there has been progress, but I don't think that we are at the stage now as yet where we can say that the processes in place are satisfactory.
Warner says that many Canadian Catholics are also hoping the new Pope will continue to support efforts at reconciliation. Pope Francis made a historic visit to Canada in 2022 to apologize for the Church's role in the residential school system. But Warner says reconciliation can't end there.
You do not correct all of the traumatic effects of that, all of the political and social effects of that by simply making statements.
Even though Pope Francis was popular in Canada, churches here still struggle with attendance, and Catholics will be watching to see whether Pope Leo continues on Francis' path or whether he charts a new course to keep the church relevant.
David Perlich, CBC News Vatican analyst, was right here, right beside me for days waiting for the moment. So we're talking about an American Pope, this man, Robert Prevost. Your gut reaction?
My gut reaction is surprise, and now I'm intrigued. I cannot wait to see the kind of papacy that we're going to get. For the longest time, the common wisdom held that the United States is too big politically, economically, and socially for them to also have the papacy. But as so often happens, common wisdom, I guess, is wrong.
Yeah, the wisdom of the crowds isn't very wise. This man has a reputation for bringing people together. Particularly people with different views. So I'm curious what you think awaits him after Francis's papacy.
The legacy, the synodal, the transparent church of Pope Francis, and many of the things that came up, the role of women in the church, LGBTQ issues, the idea of married clergy has created some division within the church. So certainly this new pope will have to deal with that. It's going to be very important. One of the titles that a pope has is Pontifex Maximus, which literally means the bridge builder, and that's something that he brought up in his speech this evening. Given that he's worked in the office for the dicastery of bishops, he's going to be well aware of what's going on in the world.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because Cardinal Ray called this, I suppose, a turning point for the church. And I'm curious what it is about this Pope, in terms of what he's facing, that makes it a turning point.
Well, I think most of us agree that something seems to have gone wrong in the world, that the post-World War II order, we've lost our way. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of anger in the world. This Pope, as he said, is going to want to build bridges. Now, as I mentioned, in the dicastery for bishops, he will have had intelligence. He will have talked to the diplomatic corps in the Vatican. He'll be aware of the situation around the world, and that may give him much more influence and make him savvier in dealing with leaders.
Last thought, David, in just 30 seconds, we witness history together here, and I'm wondering what your big takeaway will be from this moment.
The takeaway is that I really do think we're seeing a major pivot, a hinge in history, and it's amazing to be part of it and to be here and to feel it.
And the crowds?
And the crowds, I think there was a lot of surprise and maybe a lot of shock in the crowd as well.
Okay, we'll see what happens. David Perlich, thank you.
My pleasure.
We have more ahead from here in Rome, but it's an at-issue night. Rosie will be here next to break down Mark Carney's Oval Office visit with Donald Trump. And our special coverage of the election of Pope Leo will continue.
At issue tonight, Trump and Carney sit down for their first face-to-face meeting.
It was a very constructive meeting. I feel better about the relations.
The president didn't back down on his comments on the 51st state.
It's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together.
But never say never.
So how did the Prime Minister do in that first meeting with the President, and what will this mean for relations between the two countries? I'm Rosemary Barton. Here to break it down tonight, Chantal Hébert, Althea Raj, and in for Andrew Coyne, Aaron Weary. Nice to see everybody. Let's just start with how we thought the Prime Minister did in this meeting, and then we can talk about what's next and the substance. But Chantal, what did you make of how the Prime Minister dealt with a very, strange room and a president who was talking a lot and questioning Canada's sovereignty? What did you make of how he did?
Doesn't really matter that he was talking a lot, often off topic, and as much as Mark Carney managed to get this line in. And there were people who believed that the worst thing that could happen is if the 51st state issue was raised, but actually, no. The good news is that it was raised and that it was put down. I think there is a consensus that Mark Carney did well, but I also think a lot of voters were reassured by what they saw. This is someone who got elected prime minister with very little time to kick the tires of who he is. And that's anecdotal, but my experience has been that a lot of people felt reassured by what they saw.
That he sold who he was and that he delivered, at least in this first meeting. Yeah, Althea?
I think what's evident is that the Prime Minister succeeded in doing what he needed to do, was to reset the relationship. We saw President Trump talk very dismissively about Chrystia Freeland, about the former Prime Minister. And then after the meeting was over, the White House issued a video where they basically gave Mark Carney the star treatment. And you can tell from the video, and then you look back at the meeting and you realize the president has deep respect for Mark Carney and wants to be liked by Mark Carney. And I think that's why you saw words like friendship come out from the president. I think, we've often talked about the president as being someone who looks up to strong men. And I think Mr. Carney's reputation as an economist and like kind of a star on the global stage has really done wonders to reset the Canadian relationship, because Mr. Trump seems to really respect Mr. Carney. Now, how that translates into gains for Canada, that hasn't happened yet, and we will wait and see. But clearly, if objective one was to reset the relationship in a positive tone, that was achieved.
Yeah, and in challenging circumstances, Aaron, I think Chantal's right. If the president hadn't said the 51st state thing, I don't know if the Prime Minister would have had to raise it himself just to deliver that line. But he didn't have to wait. He managed to get that in. Aaron?
Yeah, the president got a lot of things in those 30 minutes. I mean, I think it's worth emphasizing just how strange that whole setting is. This idea, I mean, I think it's even saying too much to call it a meeting. It's really a reality show. What are supposed to be photo ops essentially in the Oval Office have become these sort of performances. And for Carney to have gotten through that without, an obvious major misstep, I think is a victory. I think he got the point across that he wanted to get across. I think that's probably what Canadians at home wanted to hear. I think it sort of backed up the idea that he's, being the adult in the room. But I think, Justin Trudeau's first trip to the White House was also a success, or considered a success. And there was a time when Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump seemed to get along just fine, and it didn't end up that well. So I think there's just a long way to go on this. But as far as surviving that first, spectacle, I think Mark Carney did fine.
So let's talk about then where it goes from here and sort of the substance of what happened in the meeting behind closed doors. where there was an agreement to keep talking about the next steps for a trade deal, an agreement for the president to come to Canada, and then, according to some reporting we did, conversations around lots of other things where the president seemed to want to hear what the prime minister had to say on anything from Ukraine to Russia to Iran. What has to happen now to make sure that this isn't just, a moment in the Oval Office for the prime minister, that this turns into something successful for the country? Chantal.
It's complicated. And we saw that with the so-called UK definitive deal today, which is basically a framework to talk about things and some tariffs. So an excuse to bring tariffs down. The first test is, yes, Donald Trump is going to show up for the G7, presumably under the conditions set by Canada, which is President Zelensky will be there, hence the conversation on the larger stage. But there are two schools of thought on this. One, you negotiate quickly a deal that, preserves the essential. And maybe you can, and maybe Donald Trump respects it. I don't know that. Or you wait for more pain to set in the U.S. Before you really want to have a serious talk about issues like that, because pain is coming. It hasn't come yet. It's coming here. It's coming there. So that meeting leaves both options open to the Canadian government, I believe.
And the Prime Minister has said, we're in no hurry. We will take the time it takes to do this. So that might be the point there, Althea.
Well, in terms of the framework for CUSMA, they don't really need to hit reset until next year. And I thought the language that the president used with regard to the trade deal was quite interesting. Like at once he said he needed to get to be better and have some changes, but then he also praised the deal. So it leaves the door open as to what kind of change, drastic change, or just some fine tuning. I mean, a lot of people will argue that CUSMA is not a huge change from NAFTA, and in fact, we got a better deal out of it than the Americans did. I don't know where that goes. I think what's clear is that Mark Carney wants to have a relationship with Donald Trump, and they want to be able to continue to talk, whether it's the prime minister feeling like he has the president's ear on a whole number of topics, or he's kind of like leaving a little bit of crumbs for us to follow. Like he talked a lot about the fentanyl tariffs. So perhaps there's going to be some movement on the fentanyl tariffs. How quickly the rest of the stuff gets done, I don't know. But I think one question that needs to be asked to the government is, like, if the president doesn't respect the agreement that he himself negotiated, what makes us think that the president would respect a new agreement? I feel like we've never really satisfactorily had an answer to that question from either side, the White House or the Prime Minister's office.
Okay, got to leave it there for tonight. That is that issue on the National tonight, but we're going to continue this conversation. Talk about the Conservatives' interim leader and Alberta sovereignty. You can catch those conversations on our full At Issue on YouTube or on the podcast. I'll throw things back now to Adrian in Rome.
Thanks, Rosie. It's been a day for the history books here in Rome. Coming up, scenes of celebration in St. Peter's Square as the world welcomes a new pope.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
How it unfolded moment by moment. Next. Understatement of the year is that it's been a momentous day at the Vatican. Just hours ago, the square behind me filled with thousands waiting and watching for white smoke and maybe a first glimpse of a new pope. Before we go, another look at the anticipation, the celebration, and the history made right here.
Habemus papam, Leonem decimum quartum. La pace sia con tutti voi. Tris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper.
It looks fantastic on camera. I cannot tell you what it was like to have a curbside view of history today, to feel it, to hear it, to watch the excitement, the anticipation. These are moments you don't forget. No one in the square will forget it. From all of us at the National, both here in Rome and back at home, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.